You know? For a split second last night, I sort of respected you for how you handled the cops in the accident. But today, I see my initial impression is correct. You're Claude. And the cool part is, I can say that. And you can't do anything about it because I can kick your butt.
Well, I won't cop to that, but I will say this. There's one thing I can do that you can't.
What?
I can pay for my breakfast.
Nothing burps better than bacon. Your water looked tasty.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another glorious episode with Nerd of Nerd. With Nerd of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. You're Dre.
Sounds like you're starting a prayer or something there, Jeff, and I am here for it. Like with the holy nerd and the holy nerd with you. Something, Christmas time, you got that kind of stuff.
The C&E crowd is being represented, but not the nerd crowd. They're here every month. Of course, you are Dre Alvarez, and I am Jeff May, the one that screwed up this introduction, as I always do. And we are covering one of my favorite movies for some reason. This was a movie that we probably should have done last month, but this is sort of like a by popular demand episode.
So the movie we're going to be discussing is Dutch. Discussing, I guess, going to add that accent to it when you're talking about it, is Dutching. But yeah, we're going to be Dutching this movie, which is Dutch, the 1991 movie with Ed O'Neill and Ethan Embry. There is a more modern version that somehow did worse at the box office, which is fascinating. But anyway, we're going to be discussing that movie. And as you have noted, it is a Thanksgiving movie. There's a lot of backstory there. But what's funny is, like, on the last show, we did the thing, you're like, it'd have been funny if we did Dutch. And like, it'd be so funny if we did Dutch. Wouldn't it be funny? And like, you and I back and forth a few times. And then we'll talk the payoff. But eventually it was like, yeah, we got to do Dutch.
Oh, there's a hell of a payoff. I have been championing Dutch since, like, I was like 10 years old or so when that came out. And I liked Married with Children. Dutch came out. That was sort of the big attempt to bring Ed O'Neill into the mainstream cinema world. He didn't get much. I mean, when you think about his movie credits, it's Dutch and then like Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2, like bit.
Oh, is he in 2 as well? I remember he's at the diner in 1. Does he show back up in 2?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. I'll have to look for that.
I think that's the one that's like the people need to be entertained. In part 2, he's like, I hear you're putting on a rock concert. That's good. The people need to be entertained. It's a delight. But Ed O'Neill, so there's like history behind it in that, like, Ed O'Neill was a well-known Broadway actor. He was like a stage actor and was doing all this stuff. And they kind of got him on Married with Children. It was like a, big deal, but it was so different from what he was. It's a lot of like Jim Varney, like Jim Varney was a classically trained actor and most people just know him as Ernest.
Really?
Yeah.
Ernest?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So he's probably most known for Pixar just because of how the world works.
Yeah, but Blake Clark took over pretty quickly for that role after he passed.
For kids like us, we saw the Ernest movies.
Yeah.
Absolutely love those. So yeah, that's wild to think the same thing. And then of course you've got like Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, same idea. Amazing actors, Broadway based, that then go on to do pop culture things.
Like shows on a lark, shows that'll pay the bills, and then all of a sudden they become these phenomena. So Dutch is sort of the big push. Spoiler alert, it's a bomb. It didn't get great reviews. It came out at a time where people just didn't want to watch it. Maybe like the star power of Ed O'Neill wasn't enough at the time. I loved it. They actually lampoon it in an episode of Married with Children.
Really? Oh, which
one?
One?
They walk through a video store and there's like a clearance rack of multiple copies of Dutch with the eyes of Ed O'Neill covered. And Peg walks by and just goes, ugh, and keeps going.
I've got an interesting thing that I just ran into. So Ed O'Neill is a fantastic actor, of course, been in everything, also Pixar. I'm behind the times, Jeff. I had never watched Modern Family. In doing research for this, when you're watching Ed O'Neill interviews, then I got like a Watch Mojo 10 best moments from Ed O'Neill on Modern Family. Fell on that and was like, these look pretty good. I've never seen this show. Started watching it.
There's a reason it's won a lot of Emmys.
It is fantastic. I
Yeah.
was really curious, and I had never looked into this, so I'm going to throw it to the pop culture nerd. Maybe you know. In the very first episode of Modern Family, one of the subplots is that the kid has bought a BB gun and accidentally shot his sister. And the end of the episode has to be the dad shooting the kid back. And they even like have a joke where they're planning it. And it was just one of those things where I would have had no idea had I not just watched Dutch.
Yeah.
But I was just like, did the writers of this
Yeah,
show, I
callback.
mean, clearly they love Ed O'Neill. So
Yeah.
like, did they do that as an intentional callback? It might be, and I'll research it.
It seems like I would assume Ed brought that up. He's like, because that is the sort of the little long running joke on this in this film is the BB gun incident.
So Jeff, we've got a ton to talk. I'm gonna start with a quick top level synopsis of the movie, and then I got a question for you. And we've got so many places to go.
Here, I can top down. You're real cool. Ed O'Neill has to pick up his girlfriend's kid and drive him across the country. The kid hates him. They get into fights. Guess what happens? There's your top down synopsis.
Love it. And so that's great. That's fantastic. Now, Jeff, I view what I'm about to do as more of a compliment, but we'll see how it goes in the podcast. So I'm going to give you a scale. On a scale of 1 being not at all, on a scale of 10 to being like, is that fucking Jeff? Every 5 seconds of this movie, how much do you identify with Dutch in this movie?
You know what's funny that you asked me how much I identify with Dutch is that there was a short period of time where people actually said that I looked a little like Ethan Embry, which I thought was interesting.
Hopefully I'm not going to offend you. With the eyes for sure, I thought you looked like a young Ed O'Neill, at least some similarities there. And even some of like kind of the mannerisms, as are wont to do.
Yeah, no, I get it. He has that sort of blue collar, don't mess with me energy. He's quick, he's clever. I'm not really good at comparing myself to other people, but I could see how you would think that.
I'm just saying, like, when you suggest this movie and I watched it, I was kind of like looking around and I was like, that's fucking Jeff. Like,
I would do some of that.
I'm like everybody else. I'm like, you see this? I'm like, he's like going on a road trip. He almost had a gas station Pop-Tart. I was just like, did Jeff want me to watch this movie? Because it's Jeff.
Watch my movie.
Yeah. And I mean, it was absolutely great. And let's talk the last part of the payoff, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to shut this out. Something you have done, Jeff, you have taken some hard stances on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Go listen to the You Don't Even Like This Show episode where Jeff has a doozy on mashed potatoes. You just bring it to the table, man. And if you come out of that episode not feeling angry.
My mentions and inboxes were filled to the brim after that episode dropped.
So look up You Don't Even Like This Show, Jeff May on potatoes as related to Thanksgiving. 2017, Jeff, right around Thanksgiving time, says, best Thanksgiving movies of all time. Number 1, Dutch. Number 2, fuck you for even considering a movie that isn't Dutch. What I was going to shout at is your co-host of Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Tom Ryman, before you were big, Jeff. So Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Tom Ryman tags Ethan Embry with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no offense, no response from Ethan Embry. Now, 2023, fast forward, you and I do an episode on Home Alone 2.
Yep.
And Jeff, something really, really weird. But so you did a little graphic, me as Joe Pesci, you as Marv or Harry, the tall one. And I looked at that and I was like, that comparison, that pairing is way too spot on, like a little too close to home, but also perfect. Like, the short, snarky, sarcastic guy, the taller guy, like we make.
You think I'm the goofy one and you're the sarcastic one?
But I would say I'm the more snarky one. I would say that.
You might be searching on that one, but that's fine.
But anyway, but so you did that. Now, Phil, aka Skinny Lemur, who is followed by Tom. He doesn't have a huge following, but Tom knows him, I guess. So Tom follows him.
Skinny Lemur, the I is a 1.
Yeah. So let's get it right. So it's SK1NNY Lemur on X tweeted. So that's Phil. You should do Dutch and get Ethan Embry on. And you mentioned on the show, on the Home Alone 2 episode, you're like, maybe we could have done Dutch.
Yes.
And here's the problem, Jeff. Ethan Embry liked that. Ethan Embry responds. Ethan Embry now follows you on Twitter, and he responds with, your water looks tasty.
To the old tweet. Yeah,
You did a
because I
retweet.
replied, I'm not kidding when I said I really want to do Dutch and Can't Hardly Wait and Empire Records. And then I said, okay, I guess I'm just an Embrainiac. Because I actually quote tweeted my old tweet. And that's the one that Ethan Embry saw it, clicked on that original one, and that's when he wrote, your water looks tasty.
So Ethan Embry saw this. Ethan Embry liked it. Ethan Embry now follows you. And it was very much like, guess we're doing Dutch. So that's kind of the culmination of events No, it's just kind of like, you're like, maybe we should do Dutch. It'd be funny. Somebody's like, you should do Dutch. And then Ethan Embry's like, you're awesome. And I'm
He's like, now you have to do Dutch.
and I was like, yep, we're doing Dutch. So, and I do not regret it. This was a fantastic movie for so
I really
many
like
different
this.
reasons.
I have a couple of issues with it still, but in general, it is one of my like favorite childhood holiday movies. Yeah.
I'm going to throw another complimenting Jeff out. So you had the Horror Virgin crew, the entire crew on your show. If you haven't listened to that episode, it is
that's a good one, yeah.
phenomenal. Go listen. It's right before this one in the feed. Just go listen. It's great. And then you've been on both their show, The Horror Virgin, and Romancing the Pod on Family. Is it The Family Man, I think?
The Family Man, yes. It's you. You're the Family Man.
Anyway, I was going to say the old version is just Family Man, and they did The Family Man, to get it for younger audiences. That joke track, Batman, No. Jeff's shaking his head.
No,
All right.
you're mixing up my podcasts too much. But yes, I love that crew. Paige, Mikey, and Todd are unbelievable. They're such a great team.
And they brought up movie grosses about Home Alone 2, which had me elated because I talk a lot about movie grosses in that episode.
Yeah.
And I want to stress this. This should tell you how nerdy I am. That was me holding back, as in I talk about it a ton and I was holding back. So that should tell you that. But they're back, Jeff, because I want to bring something up with you about Dutch and John Hughes.
I'm looking at the infographic you put in here, and I'm like, this is going to be a 20-minute dissertation.
I think I can go through it quickly, but all I wanted to shout out is just like John Hughes. I did not realize how amazing he was, and I knew how amazing he was. This is very much like when you go look at Larry Bird stats or Michael Jordan stats, like you knew they were great, and then you go like crunch the numbers in depth, and you're like, what the hell?
What the H?
But, so John Hughes was known in the 80s for doing teen movies, teen dramedies. Had the
Brat Pack stuff, yeah.
In the 90s, he basically migrates to, I would argue, like competent kid movies.
Family films.
Yeah. And I'll give you that. But I was going to say, I do think something that I really like that he does in all of these is he does have competent kids that we enjoy watching as the audience.
Relatively sharp children generally are a part of that. Or like what it really is it's family movies where the child is often the protagonist.
Yes. And if the child is not the direct protagonist, they are still as capable as the adults. I'm going to read this to you. From 1989 to 1994. Uncle Buck, Christmas Vacation, Home Alone, Dutch, Curly Sue, Beethoven, Home Alone 2, Dennis the Menace, Miracle on 34th Street. That is freaking ridiculous.
It is. And the worst, least profitable film in that entire collection is Dutch.
By not even a small margin. Yeah. Uncle Buck, 79 million. Christmas Vacation, 73 million. Home Alone, that's like, what the hell? 480 million. Dutch, 5 million. Curly Sue, 33 million, which is funny because Curly Sue and Dutch are remarkably close. And something we might talk is like this Roger Ebert article I found. And it was funny because I was angry at Roger Ebert because he's like, oh, these are getting rote. And I get it now looking back, being like, holy cow, John Hughes was just an absolute workhorse, putting out so many movies like this fast. But that is not a legitimate criticism. You can't say he put out another good movie like this one last year, so I can't like this movie. That's not good reviewing. But yeah, Curly Sue, 33 million, Beethoven, 57 million. I couldn't find what it cost, but there's no way it cost more than 57 million. Home Alone 2, 360 million. Dennis the Menace, 117 million. And then Miracle on 34th Street, another great Maura Wilson, who's on that, 46 million. So like Dutch is such an anomaly because this is one of those cases where you're just like a John Hughes family film that is a guaranteed 30 million with an upside of like 300 million. And it made 4.6 million, Jeff.
Who's this for? I think is the correct answer because it's not for young kids. It's not for the Home Alone crowd. 6-year-olds aren't going to care about Dutch, right? This like the other protagonist, right? Doyle is a teenager. He's what, 12 years old?
He's 12 in the movies, yeah.
Yeah.
And him going through puberty is a huge part of the movie too. So yeah.
So Married with Children is not a children's show. Like it's not a show. It's not a family show. So people are going to be scared of that. And on top of that, it's just, who is it for? And like, of course it bombed when you look back at like, all right, well, it's designed for like families with tweens, I guess.
Well, and I would definitely argue, and we'll get into the specific scenes where Home Alone, as an example, is definitely elevated in the sense that like the violence in that movie is supposed to be slapsticks. And I would argue parts of Dutch are this as well, but it's played more as a grounded movie, and it really does focus on the characters. Curly Sue, as an example, also is slapstick, right? Like Jim Belushi's getting hit by a little girl, and they're playing the silly noises and all that, and it's clearly funny.
Yeah.
And Dutch, though, they're doing the same kind of funny stuff, but it's played serious, and it's played on top of real serious issues. It's like you can have Kevin doing hyper violence, and it's like, haha, funny, because he's a relatively normal kid in that movie. When you have like a kid from a broken home and his dad's like cheating on him in a weird way, we'll talk about that. And then the kid's like being upset, you're like, yeah, this isn't slapstick. This is just sad.
So important to remember that Macaulay Culkin was like 8 years old. And that gets people into seats. Like children in family movies, like capable children is one thing. Capable tweens, people are less fascinated by it. They just are. And then because 12, 13 years old, that's more of a like, you don't really care scenario. It's like they don't want to be around their families as much anymore. Like it's different.
I would agree. And I'll throw something else out. The Ed O'Neill Married with Children buy-in. Part of the problem with this movie, and tell me if you disagree with this assessment, is you have two capable people that also have egos. They're getting in a fight with each other. That is the movie. And basically, they are both very competent individuals who both keep getting in over their head. And so as a result, it is a running gag in this movie that Ed O'Neill ends up, with his face down with his ass in the air.
Mm-hmm.
On Married with Children, he is a buffoon. In this movie, he is not a buffoon.
I'm not going to say he's a buffoon in Married with Children. I'm going to say he's put upon.
Okay.
And he's accepted his terrible fate. I don't necessarily classify him as much as of a buffoon. I guess in later seasons, we see the Homer Simpson switch.
Yeah, the Flanderization of him, yeah.
I think that really comes down to the addition of Jefferson Darcy. But this isn't about Married with Children yet.
Yeah, and this was done in the middle, like in the middle of its run, season 4. I don't remember if Jefferson Darcy had joined the show at that point. But he was a great actor. Ted McGinley, who also showed up on Sports Night. Great there, too.
Ted McGinley, Married with Children is the only TV show that Ted McGinley wasn't a death knell for. Adding Ted McGinley to a show used to be like a curse.
Yeah, Sports Night got canceled the season after him. Yep.
But just Sports Night just got canceled because it was too good for its own existence.
Well, there's a funny topic there, but we'll keep going this. But all I was going to throw out is that I think that in this movie, it's pre-Flanderization Married with Children. He is a competent person who is put upon, and the people that are coming in from the Married with Children don't quite get that nuance and are watching and maybe going, hey, this isn't funny. So that is what it is. I also want to do one last throwback to our last episode and maybe get a little in the weeds there on what this season kind of is, Jeff, which is Home Alone 2. Home Alone 2, I had and you had a lot of complaints narratively and structurally about the movie. And then you made the point that that was John Hughes, that is most John Hughes cashing in on a paycheck. And what is amusing to me is I would argue Dutch, I did not have it in my back pocket. I'd never seen it all the way through before then, is the perfect counter. Because I would argue narratively, structurally, things we are complaining about, characters having arcs, this movie has all of that.
Yep. The only concern I have in that regard is that Doyle's arc is too late. It's funny, because I had that thought, and I was actually talking to a good friend of mine at boxing earlier today, and I was like, yeah, I got to go home. I got to record a thing about Dutch. We were talking that the kid should have started, like, the arc should be like, the apex should be like the middle of the second act, really, or the end of the second act. He's like an asshole until the very end.
I would agree with that. And then what I will throw out that, like, the Home Alone 2 comparison, where this is structurally a much more sound movie that has much better reasons, doesn't do as well as just give them what they want. Just give them the slapstick. Just give the focus group what they want. Annoying to have the two next to each other. Like, Dutch is an answer to the nerd where I'm like, why wasn't there more character development? Why wasn't the story more plotted out? And John Hughes can raise his hand and go, I did that. None of you went and saw it. Watch Macaulay Culkin throw paint cans at people. And then I'll also just say Jeff was right. There's an amazing YouTube channel, Bobby Wygant, who was an interviewer in Dallas, big name. She's like in her 90s now, but she gave interviews over the years. A lot of movies and shows we have seen on this podcast, Jeff, like Searching for Bobby Fischer. She does interviews with Ethan Embry, Ed O'Neill, the director for Dutch. She also does interviews with Macaulay Culkin, and it was jarring to watch the change in Macaulay Culkin because she has him interviewed with Home Alone, with My Girl and with Home Alone 2. And I even texted you about this, like Home Alone 2, where you were just like, his performance isn't as good in the first one. It could be that stuff was going on outside. He is like dead in that interview. She's like, so who'd you enjoy working with? He's like, no one really. She's like, so you watching any movies? He's like, no, not really. She's like, so you've got your own camcorder. You interested in editing and getting into film? He's like, no. And you're just like, and in the first movie, he's like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed watching Home Alone, and I didn't know I had a blowtorch, and it was very fun to watch. So it was just like, you had that take of like, because
burnt,
Ethan, yeah, Ethan Embry is amazing in this movie. I'm really gonna shout at his acting. And I was kind of initially going to be like, well, it was better acting than like Macaulay Culkin, as you kind of said. But then I looked it up and I'm like, nah, Jeff's take is right. Macaulay Culkin, amazing. Go watch him when he's super young. By Home Alone 2, man, all the stuff going on behind the scenes was so rough, so rough. So let's actually get into the movie. It is a doozy, Jeff. And I've got some nerd questions that will go along the way.
All right.
So start of the movie starts basically with Doyle's mom, Natalie. She's at a dinner party. It's of her ex-husband.
At a country club.
There's not a lot of bad storytelling in this. We do have an example of a tell don't show, which is she's at the party. Some snooty women come up to her and say, oh, were you here last year? And she says no. And they're like, oh, what are you doing? And then she gives us a big monologue, which basically says she was a waitress at the country club. Reed, played by Chris McDonald, knocked her up. They got married so he wouldn't get scandalized. Basically, enough time passed. He divorced her, screwed her in the divorce. And, now they just have now they share custody of a kid. She's like, yeah, you want to say that? And part of the reason that it's obvious that she's there is that she has a new boyfriend that is more working class that she definitely wants to, rub the people at the party the wrong way with, which is Ed O'Neill, who are introduced quickly. He's outside smoking a cigar. While he's doing that, the door gets shut on him. A little dog starts biting him.
I would also add that his suit is very out of place. He's wearing like a green corduroy sport coat with like a plaid tie. It looks very out of place. It looks very blue collar of the time dress up.
It also looks like you're told you have to dress up, wear, pants and, a jacket and what you would dress up with. He's in there. And what I think is really important about the scene is he shows that they both know. Because at one point he's like, goes to get a hors d'oeuvre and it's caviar on a cracker. He flicks the caviar off into an ashtray. And the other people there look at him kind of disgusted. And he's like, I don't eat anything that, lays its eggs on a seabed. They kind of like nod nicely and walk away. So it's like, yeah, he's out of place. But you can, I think this scene is important because it sets up really, really quickly that he knows it. He knows it and he recognizes it. And he knows it. And he's like, he doesn't have respect for it, which is great.
Yeah, he doesn't care. And that's the important part is he, as we find out, he lives in this world. And later, you get the implication that he has a lot of money, but he's worked his way into a world he doesn't like, basically, and he has disdain for it, and he shows that. And I think that's a really interesting way of doing it. I actually really like that.
And then we have a very quick thing, which is Reed comes down and says, hey, I'm not going to be able to pick up Doyle. He was supposed to hang out with me for Thanksgiving. You get to take him. You get to tell him. And if you give me any shit, I'll throw you out of their house. That's to Natalie.
He also forces Dutch to step away. He's like, this is family business. There's a reason he does that for a reason, because there's going to be a payoff in that at the end of the movie.
Dutch comes back and says, hey, I don't know what you were talking to her about, but if you hurt her, I will punch you so hard your dog will bleed, which is an interesting threat. But it'll pay off, apparently. Oh, that's hinted at the whole time. But I mean, it is fair at this point, because at this point, Dutch is starting to get serious with Natalie. They're not, it's not.
We don't know where they are, how long they've been together.
Yeah, it's. I would argue, this is definitely the step, because it's him going up one level and wherever they're at in their relationship. I did find the mom, Natalie, very interesting in that she looked a lot like, I think, Charlie Conway's mom in Mighty Ducks. And I was just like, the 90s single mom that the hero is after. I was just like, oh, that was apparently a look in the 90s.
So that was, I believe, Jo Beth Williams was her name. And she was pretty famous. I mean, she was in like a lot of famous things. Kramer versus Kramer is obviously a pretty big one that she was in as well. Very much, she was doing great in Bombs at the time. Like because she was in Switch. She was in Dutch. She was in Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. She's in Wyatt Earp. She's the mother in Jungle to Jungle. It wasn't her best. She was in the TV show Fish Police, which I thought was really funny. But yeah, she also was in an episode of Batman the Animated Series.
It seems like everybody in these movies at some point we're just going to wind up and it's like, yeah, they've been in Batman or a John Hughes movie is going to be the case. She has to call Doyle at the boarding school and say she's picking him up instead. And there is a lot done really well here with Ethan Embry, where we see is kind of a neat freak in his room. He's an asshole to the other kid, like the kid who
He's just he's a wounded asshole, spoiled asshole. Yeah.
Yeah, other kid comes in and is like, hey, the phone's for you. He said, don't you know how to knock? And hey, I'm going to get you in trouble. And then shows the same classist behavior saying, you're just at this school because your dad works here. I'm going to make you work in the kitchen. You'll be in trouble. One thing that I really like is like none of the kids at the school put up with his shit, which is nice.
Yeah, they all think he sucks because he sucks. And they all come from the same point of privilege. So like they're all on a relatively even ground.
Yeah, so good character development quickly, where we are told that Doyle is a type A asshole, acts like he's a big deal. The people around him don't really give him much respect for it. He gets upset and kicks over a trash can, is upset that he's not going to have Thanksgiving. This is one fun scene I wanted to throw out to you, Jeff, which is he's practicing karate in the gym while he's upset.
Mhm.
What'd you think? Do you think Ethan Embry's got the chops?
Yeah, he looks good. He's, he certainly did have practice for it. There's a lot of karate in this. There are like more than 2 scenes involving karate. Yes.
This might be me putting on my English AP hat. But one thing I liked about that scene is he's practicing karate and his kicks look really crisp and he looks really good. And the other kid basically says, want to come to my house for Thanksgiving, the working class one that he snubbed earlier. He's like, no. Kid's like, fine, have fun being an asshole, walks out. And then at that point, he like gets really upset and punches really like sloppily. So it does kind of show like the nice divide of like, he acts in control. He's really confident, but when he gets angry, he does not really keep control.
Yes.
On the flip side, this is the scene I did want to ask about, Jeff. I don't know if you saw it in the notes. It's me just being overly nerdy, the type of nerd I am in the show. So Dutch is cooking for Natalie. He's cooking her dinner. And he's basically at the same time also saying, hey, I can go pick up your son.
So as they're having the talk, he's like chopping up food basically. And he's like slamming the cleaver down to chop this stuff up. And the mother is just sitting there like, ooh, like she's like kind of like taken aback. And he looks very confident. And then you see him put it all together and put it in the oven. Then we hear the timer go off and you see a beautiful dish that is clearly the same ingredients of what they were cooking.
But they're at a restaurant now.
Yes, they sure are.
Dutch is telling us, I'm going to go pick up your kid. I'm a people person. Some people don't like me, but they get to know me and we get together. It'll be great. Clearly that this is an escalation in their relationship. He's doing this well. He's cooking, acting confident. And then we see at the end, we go, oh, they wound up not eating his food. They went out to eat and he solved the problem with money, which I was like, English AP person being like, oh, that's some nice foreshadowing.
I think it's a funny bit there. I don't know if it's the fixing it with money aspects that I think you're reading too much into, but it's definitely, there's the idea that he is confident in something that he might not have the full ability to be able to do. That part I do recognize.
Yeah. But I'm getting the right read, but maybe going too far. What I will throw out is then we also do start getting some inclination about him because he's telling people at work, you do this. We're getting the idea that he's a big deal. He flies down to Georgia to go pick up Dutch, walks into his room, and this scene is wild.
So wait,
Jeff,
he flies down, right? Does he rent a car?
He would have to, I would assume, yeah.
Or he drove down, right? Does he fly? Do we know he flies?
The script I found on Wikipedia says flies, but we do just see him driving to the school. So we see him on a phone talking to some people, and then we see him driving a car with some junk. So it's either or. But so if that's his car, that's a real bummer because he does drive to pick up Ethan and foreshadowing something's going to happen in that car.
Yeah.
He walks into, I said Ethan, I should have said Doyle, but same person, Ethan Embry or Doyle. So he walks into Doyle's room. He's kind of looking around. Doyle comes in, first says, Dad. Dutch turns around. Ethan just goes wild. I can't remember the exact order, but he does a combination of throwing a book at him, shooting him with a BB gun, hitting him with a golf club, and kicking him.
Yeah. Yep. He does a lot of stuff. He goes to town on him. Which, like, I get, like, he says, I'm a friend of your mother's, you must be Doyle, but, like, that is an abduction scenario.
Which, I mean, the irony is he is 100% right. Like, that does end up happening. This is one of those scenes where, like I said, I think this is where the flavor of the film made it hard because it's supposed to be a slapstick scene, clearly, but it is so serious that you're watching it and you're just like, oh, this is serious, because he does say, hey, I'm a friend of your mom's, your dad's not coming. He's getting really upset. He's like, come on, we're going. Doyle says, we're not going. Flash cut. This was one of the few parts I had a problem with in the movie. He is holding up Ethan Doyle. He is holding him up with a hockey stick. He has tied him up to a hockey stick, almost like a luau pig.
Great scene.
And has underwear stuck in his mouth. Funny image, but with how it's portrayed in the movie, a little jarring.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where that ended up being like, that's the thing people remember. Like, that was a trailer scene in there. What's important to know is that he did shoot him with a BB gun that looks like a pistol a couple of times before, Dutch got a hold of it and was like, he's like, pack, fucking pack. And he threw the bag and he's like, I'm not going. And he's like, you're coming, so you might as well pack. And then you see later, that's when he does that. So it's like, it's him giving him the option. And when the option is removed, he's just like, all right, we're going to do it my way then.
And Ed O'Neill takes the gun and says, hey, I'm going to owe you for that, which is a recurring bit in the movie. And, I do think that is going to go along with what we're going to see a lot, which is you kind of have these escalations where at least one of the parties overreacts, and then they both overreact, and we end up at absurdity. So to your point, that's how we got here. It's like the reason we wound up with an adult tying up a kid and dragging him to the car is because the kid definitely flipped out and shot him with a BB gun and hit him with a golf club. And so the adult responds by this. And, we're basically getting the plot of the movie, which is you have these two competent but overconfident individuals that have big egos. And when they, basically go at each other, they just take it too far.
Yeah. I mean, you have this, and it is the cockiness of the two of them. And there are points where I would like to have seen the reality of it not pay off as well, of the cockiness that we're going to see, especially when they're confronted by the security guards. There's a payoff that happens that shouldn't have happened.
Oh, interesting. I didn't think I was a horrible way out scene, but we'll definitely get to there. Let's actually start the road trip. Doyle's being an ass. He's being an ass, but he's tied up. He's like, stop the car, stop the car. Easy joke. Ed O'Neill stops the car and he rolls to the floor because he's tied up in the back. They're driving and they wind up in a real place. I guess this does exist, like Fireworks City. And so like Ed O'Neill filling up the car. I should be calling him Dutch because that's the name of the movie. So Dutch, is filling up with gas and he goes and picks up some fireworks and is like, I got it. I got this kid. He picks up, fireworks
and a pack of racy playing cards
that he's taunting Doyle with. Doyle's acting disgusted, but we'll find out later he's okay with it. And then we have a great scene where Dutch drives Doyle down the road and is setting off the fireworks. This was described by the director and writer as like Chaplin-esque. This was an improvisational scene, kind of, in the sense that it wasn't in the original script, but then they came and added it. And it's great because we're seeing what we wanted, which is Dutch is trying to match with Doyle, connect with him, give him something, say, hey, I know how to talk to kids. Is like, I'm going to set off a bunch of fireworks and this is going to be awesome. In both real life and the movie, Doyle is kind of scared of the fireworks, maybe rightfully so. So he stays in the car.
Yeah. So the fireworks scene is very interesting to me, primarily because like it's clearly Ed O'Neill with the fireworks, like putting a Roman candle in his ass and stuff like that. Like when I was watching this, I was like, man, I don't know how they got insurance for this. So like Ed O'Neill is clear. It's not a stunt man for some of it. It's clearly Ed O'Neill fucking around with these fireworks. And I'm like, Jesus.
And the funny thing is, yeah, in listening to interviews, like the Bobby interview, like Ethan Embry was scared. Ethan Randall at the time, by the way, was his name, and that later got changed. But he was scared and was like scared one of the fireworks would go into the car, and they're like, it's fine. But the director said it was a couple night shoot because just of the logistics, but seemed like it was a relatively safe one. And yeah, said that like Ed O'Neill put on like a Chaplin-esque performance, which I would agree with, and it's a great thing.
People do not appreciate how good of an actor Ed O'Neill is. He's also like a ridiculously talented Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy. Like he's like a deep black belt.
The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, bunch of stuff there, like up there with Ernie Reyes Jr. and him, two pop culture jiu-jitsu people, and maybe they're the flip side of the coin. Like Ernie Reyes starts martial arts, gets acting. Ed O'Neill starts acting, gets martial arts, but they are both great. There needs to be a movie with both of them. I think we can all agree. So somebody make that happen. Ed O'Neill, Ernie Reyes Jr. All right. You're not going, Jeff. But anyway, So that scene happens, but the end of it does end with like the payoff, which is he puts a firework on the fence. It spins off the fence. It
Yeah, like a
spins into all the
pinwheel,
other
yeah.
fireworks. He's like, oh no, he throws his coat on top of it to hold the blast. All of the fireworks go off. Shred his coat.
Yeah.
He
There's
picks up
just
the shredded
goose
coat.
down everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a goose down coat. He puts the coat back on, gets back in the car, and then, at that point, Doyle isn't letting him into the car either because he's being an asshole, most likely, or scared. And then eventually he gets into the car and it's time to go. In the car, they kind of get in a pissing contest with each other, and there's a bet over $20. And do you remember what that was for?
It was that it was basically like I could cause you damage if I wanted.
Yeah, so like
He's
I
like,
kick
how
your
much
ass.
we bet? And he goes $5,000. He's like, I bet you even have it too. Let's make it a man. Let's do $20. Let's make it a man's bet.
So they each put $20 up, and then Doyle pulls the cigar out of Dutch's mouth.
No.
Yeah, or he had put the cigar down.
Oh,
Right?
it's the
It's a cigar.
It's not the lighter.
I thought it was a cigar, or you said I thought he pulled a cigar that was in the tray. But
Oh, for
regardless,
some reason I thought it was the cigarette lighter, but it could have been the cigar. Yeah,
either or, go watch the movie to find out. People that have not seen the movie, so
it is available on Max, by the way.
yeah. The description, but the description also says that he flew to Georgia, so who knows how reliable that is. After the $20 bet, he gets a lit cigar, throws it in Ed O'Neill's lap while they are on the highway. He gets really pissed.
He's like losing his shit. Yeah, he's about to fucking die.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he just got lit on fire while on the highway. So again, this is the escalation where it's like they're having a pissing contest. One person takes it too far. They pull the car over. Dutch gets out and is just like fucking pissed. Doyle gets out of the car and he's like, get back in, let's go. Doyle's saying like, I won, haha.
Yeah.
He's pulling, snow, possibly
He's
rocks.
throwing chunks of frozen earth and junk.
Yeah. At the car. And so this is the hard problem where I can go both ways here, because I think what Dutch does here is kind of wrong. It's 100% wrong, but I can kind of see where he's trying to do the break Doyle's spirit, which isn't even implicit. This is explicit stuff. Something I haven't brought up a ton yet, Jeff, I mentioned at the top, was the Roger Ebert review of this movie, where he's just like, I don't understand why this and this didn't happen. And I'm like, there is explicit text in the movie. So Dutch has explicitly said, and will later explicitly said, my purpose this trip is to break Doyle in. He's a moody teenager. He's an asshole. I'm going to break his spirit. And we're going to be friends.
Well, it's also beyond that though. The point is that he addresses this very specifically. He's like, there is a chance that we are going to be related, and we need to build a bond, or else I'm going to seem like an invader. And so he needs to break that. They need to have a bonding moment.
100%. And at this point, though, that's the problem, is we have a lapse of authority where he has just done something egregious, lit his potential future stepdad on fire. He has hopped out of a car next to the highway in the middle of the night. He is throwing, rocks at a car that is either a rental or an expensive individual car. And he is like, stop it right now. Get in the car. If you don't, I'm leaving you. And of course, he pulls the trigger and throws it again. And this is where I can go both ways, because I could see this being like, this is an entitled kid that has never been told no his entire life.
He doesn't think there are any negative repercussions for his actions.
And we even see that earlier in the movie, because while he's at the boarding school, he gets really pissed off at his mom telling him he has to come home for Thanksgiving, not spend it with his dad. And he just like walks in the hall and kicks over a trash can, and the janitor's like, whatever. And it's like, yeah, you can clearly see that he has learned I am allowed to be an asshole to people. Yeah. And like, we can see that Dutch is seeing this and saying no, but the response is he actually does drive off, leaving Doyle by the side of a highway.
Yeah, I'll see you at the motel. It's 50 miles down the road.
There's no conceivable way it was 50, but it was walkable
50.
down the road. He says 50, which I'm like, I think, who knows? I could have been maybe 2 or 3. It doesn't look like Doyle gets a ride.
Yeah, he could have either hitchhiked or walked.
I think what happened, I'm going way into the weeds on this scene. You know me, Jeff, this is what I do, is that he basically drove 5 miles down the road. There was a motel there. So Dutch checks into a motel probably about 5 miles down the road. So I'm guessing that was his plan too, was like, if it wasn't 50 miles, he would have driven 3 or 4 miles, waited for Doyle. That is also what he is doing here. He stops in a motel. He waits for Doyle. Doyle like briefly debates calling. I think it was his mom, right? He finds a payphone.
Yeah, he's going to call his mom, and then he just doesn't.
And I mean, so he maybe has a little change on him because he doesn't call collect or anything or does nothing. But yeah, he calls and hangs up and says, "Damn it." And that's another part of this movie that'll show up is a lot of these characters proving that they can do it to themselves. Like a lot of this is the characters fighting with themselves. So Doyle and Dutch are in a fight with each other, both saying, "I'm not going to lose," and they're going to ignore other stuff. So this is where the movie gets even wilder, Jeff. Doyle gets to the motel. He's fucking pissed off, rightfully so. Dutch is like, whatever. And then he's like, "Well, where's my bag?" And he's like, "I didn't even bother bringing it in. I didn't think you were going to be alive. It's in the car." Doyle gets the keys to the car, goes out to the car. He drives the car
Fucking
off,
takes the car.
takes the car. It's a movie that I wasn't worried about because I've, seen the end and stuff. So like I wasn't scared, but was there any point in that movie where like he ditches the car in the middle of the road and it gets hit by a truck and just dragged along and ends up in a ditch?
Yeah.
Was there at any point fear that you were like, he's actually in the car?
No, because they wouldn't do that in the movie. But on top of that too, like he clearly just doesn't, he thinks he can drive a car and he can't. He has that misplaced confidence.
Did you think that he thought he could drive the car and couldn't? Or is it that
Yes.
okay, so that actually is very important because I thought he ditched the car in the middle of the road for someone to hit it.
No,
or to just ditch it.
No, that's why he drives through and it's like the car's moving all over the place and then he drives through all the fences and stuff. It's because he's trying to leave, but he's not capable of doing it because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He basically like stalls out the car in the middle of the street, gets out, and just fucking like leaves it there. And then it gets hit. And a tractor trailer thinks he killed a guy, and Dutch thinks that Doyle is dead, and then Doyle shows up. And Doyle's clearly been crying, but he wants to still seem tough.
Okay, well, that's important. So the crying part is key because he's crying, but
Well,
he
he's like
looks at
wiping
Dutch and
tears away, like he's swallowing the tears.
and then he says, "I guess this makes us even." And so that's kind of the part to what you're saying, right? The braggadocio, right? He's sad. He could show emotion. He could say, "Sorry, I fucked up." Instead of saying sorry, he has to be an ass. And then this is where we get clue number 2 about Dutch, both kind of as a person and his well-offness, because a cop writes him a ticket, says like, "You're very lucky, sir." Dutch goes up, palms the driver some money, probably a couple hundred, right?
Probably more than that because he says for all the damages and for your time. And if it's not enough, make sure you call me. So like it's probably a lot of money.
Well, that's what's going to get interesting because in the near future, we're going to see he has even more money in his wallet. But he basically says, yeah, exactly what you just said. "Hey, here's for going along with my story." So clearly the story is going to be something like the car, he stalled the car out in the road because he says, "Hey, this kid's a fucked up kid. He doesn't need that on his record at this point." Gives him some money, talks to the cop enough so that he just winds up with a ticket, gets into the room and is rightfully so furious.
And Ethan is like, he's now wounded and lashing out. Like you can tell, like the big growth of this is that he is clearly in over his head emotionally, doesn't know how to deal with it, still an asshole. We do a little thing where they have a standoff again and he fucking drills Ed O'Neill in the face. Dutch is like, "All right, no, we're going to fight again, but I'm going to give you the first hit." He puts his hands in his pockets and he's like, "No kicking," and he teaches him how to throw. He's very condescending.
Ed O'Neill walks up to Doyle and he's like, "Keep your fingers on the outside because that's how you throw a punch." And I'm like,
break your little thummies. Yeah.
It's like, this kid's a brown belt. He knows how to throw a punch. I mean, I know he does like the open.
But he's being condescending about it because he's doing karate, which is a very un-American way to fight. He even says some good old-fashioned American street fighting.
And here's the thing, a brown belt in karate, when given a free punch on your face, can do some damage.
Not a 12-year-old. I'd fuck that kid up.
He ends face down, ass up. This is a popular image for.
That's the way we see our Dutch.
Yes. Yeah, that might be the intro, Jeff. And we cut to the next scene. So we don't know how long he was laid out. Ethan Embry is just looking at his fist like, "I did that." But then we just do a smooth cut to the next scene where they're both kind of asleep-ish, where they're like both in bed, the lights are off. Dutch opens up his wallet, sees like a picture of Natalie, Doyle's mom, has his own card, shows that he has like, I think $217.
A little over $200 left. Yeah.
Yeah, in his wallet. So to your point, like to the implications that he is well off, I don't have it in the notes, but there's a conversation between him and Doyle at some point where he's just like, hey, I'm not after your mom's money. I make more money than your mom gets from
Kind
your
of,
dad.
yeah. So Doyle keeps calling him working class, and he's like, Why is that bad?" And he's like, "No." He's like, any good economy needs hands." Like he's really condescending, and he's like, "I make a pretty good living myself. Certainly a lot more than your father shells out to your mother." Like he's like, "I'm doing better than you realize." Kind of an implication, but we don't
And I
get
mean,
that much info. But he also sees with the playing card.
and yeah, the music that was playing, like, and originally, like, yeah,
And does a little strip tease with the playing card. Yeah.
well, that's what so when Dutch first buys the playing card, and he is showing, he's like, hey, I got something. He's like doing like a magic trick,
It's funny that they do clearly have a close-up magician doing that for the take,
and that's where you differ from Ed O'Neill, aka Dutch, Jeff, because you can do sleight of hand magic. You might even know that trick. So he's doing like a magic trick to like show the card coming up, and then later, it's late night, Doyle's up alone. He's looking at the playing cards, looking alone, and Dutch is like laughs to himself, puts a towel or something over his eyes, and goes to sleep.
Yeah, and the next morning he says, "How'd you sleep, Ace?"
Yeah.
Which is
And
very
to your
clever.
point, here is where I would argue, I think we're probably on the same board. This kind of feels where Doyle should start turning it around,
This
and
should
he
be the
doesn't.
scene. Yeah, like it's not good enough yet. He's still going to be a huge asshole the whole time. He's not softening up fast enough for this to like make a lot of sense.
We get the scene that Ethan quoted at you. So the next morning, they're eating breakfast. Again, Doyle's back to being an asshole. Dutch is back to being kind of annoyed with it. It's like Doyle's like, last night when you got me out of that jam and paid a bunch of money for me, I thought you were cool, but now you're not putting up with my
Yeah.
shit. I guess you're not cool. And it's like,
Well, and he was
no.
like, I can kick your ass. He's like, I can do this, I can do that. And then Dutch is like, well, there's one thing I can do that you can't do. Pay for my breakfast.
So then they wind up out after the fact, and he's like burping up his food.
Yeah, your water looked tasty. Next is the bus.
They hop on a bus. That's
They
for
hop
part
on
of the
bus.
ride. And then
Um,
while on the ride, Doyle's being an ass to some people on the bus. Can you keep it down with their boombox? And they get upset and they're like, hey, those are some nice shoes.
they
And we see that
basically,
it's
they take issues.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, I do feel that's important. Is like Doyle's got this attitude, and every time he runs into someone with his attitude, they're like, "Don't fucking care, you're
Yeah,
12."
when he meets the real world, he gets a real reality check. It's just that the reality check doesn't work fast enough.
Yeah, and then so they get some level of distance right towards home. Clearly not the whole way. They don't have a bus all the way back to Chicago or wherever they are in Illinois. And so then Dutch is trying to get Doyle to hitchhike. And again, Roger Ebert, this is very explicit, where what is clearly happening is he's like, we're going to have to hitchhike for a ride, look pathetic, look sad. Here's what you have to do. And he is intentionally humbling him because it's like, we've seen he has the money to get home. We know they can call Doyle's mom.
Yeah.
But Dutch's plan right now is he's like, this kid is still an ass. I need to humble him. He's still being rude to
You
people.
need
on
to
the bus.
learn how to be a part of society, of like the real world. Yeah.
And then they get picked up by two prostitutes and like have a really, initially it seems nice because they're like, oh, they look so sad. Let's pick them up. And they have like a sports car of some sort.
When you say a sports car, it's like a Celica or something like that. Like it's one
got
of those,
the 80s
like,
design, I guess,
late
is what I'm saying.
80s, like where all the cars were a little sharper.
So
kind
yeah,
of
modern
design,
days would
yeah.
look. So there are two prostitutes there, and we have two funny scenes going on at the same time. One is Doyle is in the back seat flirting. Her name is Brock, and in the front seat, this is wild, Jeff. Did you know this ahead of time before I put it in the notes? He's in the front seat with Haley,
Yeah.
who is played by Elizabeth Daily.
Mm-hmm.
IMDb rabbit hole, Jeff. But what do you think the most known for?
But, I mean, she's a very, very talented voice actor. Like, I mean, obviously, like she's like on like Tara Strong levels of.
And the big name for me is Tommy Pickles.
Yeah, she
Tommy
was
Pickles.
Tommy Pickles. That's right.
So she would have been Tommy Pickles. And so what's awkward about that slightly is like she's clearly doing like a sexy voice, and they're saying they're prostitutes. You're like, that's not far off from your Tommy Pickles voice as an awkward feeling. But yeah, so what's happening is Doyle is
He's also, by
flirting-
the way, she's married to the Paris Hilton sex tape guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah,
I
Rick
did not know
Solomon.
that part of that IMDb rabbit hole. So Doyle's floating in the backseat with Brock, very chesty prostitute. In the front seat, Dutch is falling asleep. While he is falling asleep, Haley manages to snake his wallet out of his pants.
Yeah.
And then decides to go one further. She tries to go for his ring. I forgot to mention this, Jeff, and I think in the fight scene, Dutch says, like, the last guy who got in a fight with me ended up with an indent
Right.
of this ring in his head. We're going to have a rule of threes coming up. So this is number 2. She's trying to take the ring off of his pinky. She can't get it off. So she like tries to put some lotion
Chekhov's
on it.
pinky ring, yeah.
Yeah, she gets some lotion in his mouth. He like turns over. So the pinky ring is safe, but his wallet is gone. Doyle missed the whole thing because he's really having fun talking to an adult woman. It's very chesty. Obviously, a kid going through puberty. That's a theme in this movie. Next morning, they drive up to a diner. Next
like
morning,
a gas station, one of those like giant rest stops where it's like gas, food, lodging.
Love those, actually. Yeah. So drives up to one of those. Doyle is asleep with his head on her chest, wakes up, kind of chuckles, right? Because he's like drooling on her chest. And he's like, what were you dreaming about? He's like, dreaming about that. They get out and, the 2 women are like, hey, we're going to, you meet us inside. We'll pay for gas. Yeah. And, Doyle's even trying to stay back. No, I'll take a walk. Let's wait. And they're like, no, I got to get something from the car. You go in. Well, they get in. Dutch is basically going like, don't be so naive. Don't be silly.
He calls him a hypocrite.
He does that.
He legitimately calls him out for his hypocrisy, where he's like, everybody else who does work and you think they're below you, but you got a young girl with a big, I think he says a set of bazookas on her or something like that. Basically saying like, a working girl with tits, all of a sudden you think they're the best person in the world. He's like, you're a fucking hypocrite. Like,
yeah. And I mean, the easy answer is right. And I mean, he'll even say it later, which he does say in a few minutes, like he was horny. And then then Ed O'Neill's trying to prove that he's street smart, saying like, and by the way, don't be so trusting. And then realizes his wallet is gone and the car is gone.
Well, they realize the car is gone. And then he's like, shit, she's got my wallet. Like,
so
yeah,
they run out into the parking lot. He's upset. And at this point, this is an interesting, I'm curious your take, because we've had a couple here, because you really did change the car scene for me, because I did misread that as like Doyle being a genuine ass instead of maybe a 50% ass, and that was an accident. It wasn't intentional. And that makes that scene a little better, because his response then is he's scared and he messed up. And instead of being able to live with that, he lashes out, which is a common theme. So they wind up in the parking lot, and like Dutch is just like, I've had it. I'm done. They have some really funny back and forth. We do have another ass up scene right in front, because they get in a shouting match. Doyle's like, I'm going to kick your ass. Dutch is like, no, you're not. He makes an insult about Dutch's mom. He said, my mother's a saint. He says, what, for having puppies? That's
Dutch kind of turns around and slips on the ice, falls.
He kind of like kicks out angrily. He wasn't going to hit him. They're too far away for him to do it, but he kicks angrily, but it's slippery, slips on the ice, shoe goes up in the air. Again, this is like slapstick humor that just doesn't play in the scene, is the only unfortunate note I would give. Winds up, ass in the air, then he's getting up. I know you and I definitely feel that, the like getting up from a fall when you're in your 40s, where he's just like slowly getting up. Doyle's like, God, you're pathetic. And at that point, Dutch is just like, I'm done.
Yeah, Dutch has hit this fucking wall where he's like, that's it, you're a fucking monster. And you know what? I may love your mom, but if you're a part of the package, I'm fucking done. I can't do this. You don't want anybody happy in your life. And so I give up. Call your mom, call your father, do whatever you want. I'm going to stay here. Best of luck to you both.
Dutch is just like, I'm done. I'm going to sit here and hope I get arrested. I don't want to be part of the family. And then we actually finally start to get a little bit of a crack with Doyle.
And he's like, you can't give up on her. And he's like, you did. And when he says all this stuff, and all Dutch does this, like he bends over and like shows him his ass.
Yeah.
He like is just like, fuck you. And so he's like, I had all this money. I was, and he's like, why didn't you use it? And he's like, because you can't always use that. Like, you can't always just rely on money to be the thing that saves you. Like, you need to learn how to grow.
And he's saying that to him. There's a nice back and forth where this is like right when he breaks, because Doyle says, I don't hate my mother, for the record. Ed O'Neill shouts back, kiss my ass, for the record. Love it. And then Doyle actually starts crying and saying like, did my mom tell you I said I hated her? And he's like, well, you're a pictures with 1,000 words kind of guy. And he kind of starts having a breakdown. And then what is important is earlier in the movie, he tried to track his dad down in England, because that's what he was told. He was told his dad went away for work to England. That's why he couldn't be there for Thanksgiving. So he calls the office, says, give me his number in England. They're like, no, you're a kid. He goes, when I find out who did that, you're fired. The adult's like, whatever. So he just goes ahead and gives his dad's house a call. And when he does, a woman picks up in, clearly bedroom phone. I guess he wouldn't know if it was the bedroom phone, but it's the bedroom phone. They're in bed together. And so he
Just
realizes,
say he's sleeping really
oh,
quiet.
okay, yeah, that'll work. And so basically he realizes, yeah, my dad didn't ditch me for Thanksgiving for, business. He ditched me for a woman that he wanted to hang out with.
Yeah. A woman.
He comes back out and is like, come on, Dutch, we're close. We can do this. And I think this is like the turn where he realizes he's like, I have been an asshole. I haven't been self-reliant. I've been given a challenge. Can I get myself home without calling someone for help? And he's like, come on, Dutch, let's do this. Let's do this. And Dutch, eventually is like, no. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And they wind up on the large cement tubes, basically one of the big trucks doing those. They sneak into one of those and they wind up in Hammond, Indiana in a repo for construction material. And here's the scene you were talking about, which is very interesting, where I actually think you're right. I think that this scene could have just been cut a little early and would have still played for the same thing, which is they get out of the truck and he's like, what are we going to do? And Dutch says like, why don't we find a security guard? They'll help us out. So they do find some security guards. Security guards like, hey, what are you doing? They throw them out.
Yeah, they immediately are like, get out of here, you homeless bums.
Yeah. And at that point, Doyle, again, still hasn't quite learned. I would agree with you at this point. Is like, you can't talk to me that way. You're in trouble. I'm going to kick your ass. And then we have what should have happened earlier when a 12-year-old tries to assault a grown man. They just body him. They actually split his head.
They throw him into a chain link fence and they're like, get the fuck out of here. Dutch gets up and is like, confronts them like, that's a kid. What's wrong with you? Like, we're fine. We're going to move. We're getting on our way. Just let us go. And they start beating Dutch. They are like, and then so Doyle gets up, gets his little karate stance and beats the ass off of these guys. He beats the brakes off of them. He does karate kicks to their faces and fucking punching them in the dick. And then he goes and he checks on Dutch. The guys get back up and they're like, you're dead, kid. And he pulls out the gun.
Yeah.
The BB gun.
The BB gun was in Dutch's pocket. Doyle sees it, pulls it out and points it at him. And then at this point, Dutch is like, he's crazy.
Yeah,
and
don't do it, Pete. You already killed somebody today. And then like he convinces Doyle to go along with it and then says, we'll go find him. And the guys are like begging for their lives. It's a very John Hughes moment. It's a very get on your knees and tell me you love me scene where they love doing that with asshole adults, making them beg for mercy from children. And so like, he's like, yeah, we'll take you to a motel. You can burn it down. And, there's lots of families there. Lots of people will die. And they're like, yeah, go do that. Go do that. I think had the scene ended with him getting bodied and like, get out of here, then it's like a humbling experience. Hey, you can't just fight your way out of everything. Ended it with a slapstick thing. And I would agree at this point, we've had the arc, we've had the turn. So feels out of place. This is the first time that they're really this is where they're working as a team for the first time.
So that part of it is good.
It's not a particularly strong way to make it's way too late in the movie for it to be like the big that turns them a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think, it's the good is they're getting along. They're working together on something, which is good.
He's supposed to be terribly unlikable and he's nailing it.
Yeah. But at this point in the movie, he's starting to do better. And then we get another John Hughes class scene, which is they walk into a restaurant, not even really a posh one. I would say like mid-tier at best. It doesn't look particularly
it could
fancy.
be 1991 posh.
Yeah. So, what 2000s Chili's is 1990s posh. So anyway, they wind up in a restaurant and they're just like, hey, we just need to use the restroom. And she's like, get out of here, you homeless people. And then we get the hope that they might be able to like hustle somebody because this like richer looking family is like, are you road people? And then we see Dutch do what he did before. Yeah, we're coming from Georgia. We're going up to Chicago for family. He's like, we got him. And this is a great payoff where the rich people drive him to a homeless shelter and are like, they'll take care of you here. Your dad's doing great. Buck up.
Yeah. Give your dad a little bit of credit here. He's trying his best. Don't give up. Yeah. And they're just like, nice yuppie 1991 couple that are like, hey, I think she was like, we're on the board of this shelter or something like that. Like, they're like, good luck. They'll take care of you there. They drop them off. It's for, it's a family boarding scenario.
Yeah. And then so we get this scene I thought was quite enjoyable, which is Doyle being his fastidious self is like he's eating his meal. And before he's doing it, he's like wiping off all the silverware. He's got wet wipes. He's setting up his food all perfectly. And like everybody in
he's
there.
Setting his silverware up. Like he puts his butter knife he puts it like sideways or perpendicular, I guess, on the bread plate while he like pulls his bread apart like he's at the goddamn Ritz.
And yeah, this is in a homeless shelter the day before Thanksgiving. It does look like a Thanksgiving-ish meal. So, everybody's there. We get, everybody's staring at him at one point. We get Doyle. He's got like a biscuit of some sort, a roll.
It's a roll, yeah.
Yeah, a roll. And then there's this cute little kid next to him that tries to take his roll. And he's like, no, that's mine. And then of course, decides
Dutch
not to be a monster.
Yeah, Dutch kind of looks over and like rolls his eyes and goes back to what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then Dutch hands the other half of the roll over, and the little
Or Doyle does, yeah.
very happy. Yeah. Or excuse me, Doyle does, yeah.
And then
and that is, well, that is also sort of the introduction of the family that they sort of meet up with.
So yeah, they wind up in a group sleeping situation. So everybody's just on cots in essentially a gymnasium. We get some level of humor, which is
Dutch can't get the cot to lock in, so he keeps like falling down and shit.
Yeah, he's on a cot that because they're locked cots. So this one is either busted or he's too heavy, and it keeps falling over and waking people up, and they're saying shh. And then at one point he switches with Doyle, and they're doing that. And at this point we get Doyle.
He doesn't switch with Doyle, does he?
He does. Yeah,
he stays on the ground.
So no, he switches with Doyle after it falls. It falls once. He tries to fix it. It falls a second time. He tells Doyle to switch with him. They switch cots.
No,
and
they
the
don't
scene
switch.
ends. They switch.
Are you sure? Are you 100% sure they switched, Dre?
I would say 70% willing to put money on it. $20 each or whatever.
I just watched it, and he's there. It falls down, and then finally it just falls down to the ground flat, and he just goes, ugh. And then that's the end of the scene.
Well, that's the last one. I thought he says switch with him in the middle of the scene because he doesn't switch.
Yeah, he says switch with me, and he goes, why? He goes,
15,000.
Yeah, you're a lot less. You weigh less than me. And then by the time then it just falls again, and it's a thing. But no, they do not switch.
So he attempts
you were
to try.
so confident that they switched.
I gave you 70%, as in I would have put $20 and 70% odds there. I was not going to do 100%. I'm not that silly. All right. With that being said, so while that is also going on, Doyle is talking to like his family, and there's the mom of the family next to it, and she does a lot of show don't tell don't show. It's like, oh yeah, my husband came out here for a job, got laid off from an auto plant. We're living out of our car right now. This is nicer than a car. I bet you miss your mom, right? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you want to be with her? Yeah. Very close to the pigeon lady with a marginally better payoff, but I was thinking about it and I see why it paid off. So, but that's the end of the night. It ends on a silly note. And I would argue that's it. This is a serious scene with Doyle showing some humanity, but the end of the scene is Dutch's bed falling another time and him just going, yeah. So it's like, and that'll even be the end of the movie, which we are closely approaching, which is you have these very serious moments, and instead of letting them end on a good note, it ends on kind of a silly note that feels out of place, which would be my only real criticism of the movie. I was about to just head to Thanksgiving Day where everything comes together.
Yeah. I love it when a plan comes together.
All right. So Chris McDonald ends up, he drives to Natalie's house, and I forget the mom that's with her, or I don't know if it's her mom or a housekeeper, but someone is there with her that is in a bunch of stuff, the actress.
She was in something that we covered. Microwaving with Marge.
That's Microwaving with Marge is in there cooking a turkey. That is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So that's going on. You got the Thanksgiving Day happening. The door rings. We're like, oh, they made it. And nope, it's Reed, the asshole. McDonald he is so good.
So good at being an asshole. Yeah.
He is in this movie for about 5 to 10 minutes and just milks every scene.
Just a delight the entire time.
Comes in, basically says, hey, I'm here for Thanksgiving with Doyle. Clearly knows he's been caught. Acting like he does own the place. So walking around like he owns the place, which he does. Dutch and Doyle then show up. They're in a beat up junker of a car. The family that they befriended at the shelter has driven him. We do have Dutch ending the scene saying, here's my card, call my place on Monday, we'll get you hooked up. I would make the argument that that's good. That's enough to basically say he shows he has humanity. It's rough in that they end the movie with 3 of them with a full turkey in like a mini mansion. But I can understand not wanting
a mini mansion, by the way. That is a full mansion. That is an estate.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is what we've got is Reed is rich, and this is the house that he's letting her have. So whatever his real house is orders of
I
magnitude.
mean, it
bigger.
might just be like a fancy apartment in the city. Like, like a lot of because he's single, he's back on his own. They're divorced, and that's the house that he used to live in. So most likely it's one of those like fancy ass bachelor pads in the city.
Oh, that would make sense.
Like
Okay.
a
And so like
super, a super high end apartment, like Bruce Wayne's apartment in Gotham. The one that's not Wayne Manor, but his apartment.
and you would be shocked to hear this, as I do not cover Batman for a living. I have not actually seen Gotham yet. I haven't got up
No,
yet.
it's from The Dark Knight. I mean, his
Oh,
literal
so
apartment in
you
Gotham
actually, the
City.
second one, yeah, when he does get kicked.
after Wayne Manor burned down. Yeah.
But I thought you were talking the series Gotham. So apologies for the confusion. But anyway, back at it. They're a good reason to how they got back. We do get the payoff that, unlike the Pigeon Lady, where Macaulay Culkin's like, here's a $10 ornament, they actually are like, I'm going to get you a job. We'll be fine.
Yeah, he was like, call the office on Monday. We're gonna get you set up. Yeah.
He could have invited him in for dinner. The reason they don't is because you have to now finally have the confrontation between Doyle, Reed, Dutch, like that trifecta all has to have a series of
All
confrontations.
the
with this.
men.
Yeah, that have been having all this animosity over Natalie. So they wind up in the house, and Reed's like, "Hey, buddy, I'm here for Thanksgiving. You come with me." And he's like, "I called. This is where you're saying you were with a woman.
Answered.
Like, I don't want to come here." Something that I had kind of left out in the synopsis. There are a few situations where people just mistake Doyle for Dutch's kid. He's like, "That's your dad," and they're like, "Yeah." And of course, they're doing a grift, but of course, they have grown to the point where it is like somewhat sweet and sentimental, where like Dutch will look at Doyle and Doyle doesn't say no. So it's like, oh, sweet. So his actual dad is there. He's like, "Come with me for Thanksgiving." He's like, "I'm not going with you." He's like, "You're not staying with her." And then he's like, "Well, if you're staying with her, I want you gone." Basically says he's going to kick the mom out of the house now.
Did you mention that he asked Dutch to leave, to step out? Because this is a family thing, and he goes to close the door, and Dutch just stops the door and walks right back in.
And that's definitely juxtaposing with the first half of the movie, where he says it's a family affair. Can you walk over there? And he does. So Doyle says, "I'm not going with you, Dad." Dad says, "Hey, I'm kicking you out."
Yeah. Then I want you out of here by Monday.
Well,
Dutch looks at the family first and he goes, "Excuse me for 1 second."
Yeah.
And then he walks out. He asks, when did you say they have to leave? Giving him a chance to be like, you gonna correct yourself here? Are you still gonna be an asshole? He's still an asshole. And then you can see him, he adjusts the pinky ring to just brass knuckle levels and then just grabs him by the tie and just dings him once in the forehead.
and then Chris
and then-
McDonald is concussed and like
Yeah.
barely walking. And then
And-
Dutch is like, "You're going to
Yeah.
give him 6 months?"
Yeah, he's like, how's 6 months sound? And he goes, look, that kid needs a father, and you need to be it. I will never be this child's father. And he does. He's like, it's a surprisingly interesting sort of conversation that they have, where he's like, it's not just like, you're the bad guy, go away, see you later, forever. It's like, you need to be a better man for your child. And that's like, it was like a really refreshing thing to see in there, and to see that sort of laid in. And I wonder what level of the draft that showed up in, of the script, because it is sort of, I mean, it's sappy, but it's so against what we normally get. So I thought it was neat.
I 100% agree. So the one problem is, might end up with him not remembering it because he walks to his car, having ding the head. He's like walking around weird, almost slips open a door. Oops, I got it. And then actually does fall over. So I'm
Yeah.
like, you probably
He
killed
probably
him.
died
He's-
on the way home. Yeah.
Yeah, he's driving with a concussion. He's either going to pass out and drive into traffic or just die. So that's good. Comes back in. Happy ending. I would have ended it there, but got to get the payoff for the BB gun, because he says, "Hey, go get my coat. I got something nice in there for your mom." Possible implication could be a ring or something. He goes to get it. Then Dutch pulls out the BB gun, which again has to look jarring, because like to the other people at the table, it looks like he just pulled out a gun.
I mean, it looks like an NES zapper.
Oh, I'll give you that. He's pointing it right at him. Everybody's looking at him like, "What you gonna do?" He starts laughing. Doyle starts laughing, starts fading out, and then we do hear the shot at the end.
And the yelp. Yeah, you
Yep.
hear this.
That-
You remember that they also play that music.
And they end with the song, yeah.
And then that's the plot. That's the general synopsis of it. It was a long trip to get there, just like Dutch and Doyle had, but we did get there through there. Now, again, I think Doyle turns a little too late. We don't see a lot of the inklings in there. I guess maybe if you're like a child psychologist, it might seem a bit It's almost too real.
That's what I was going to say is that
yeah.
you've got these real scenes, like the scene where the car, like I said, that actually makes a lot more sense now, where it's like he is just fucked up, tried to do something where he proved he's an adult, not only proved he wasn't an adult, so he's not competent, put someone's life in danger,
Yeah.
scared this new guy. Oh my God, what the hell have I done? He's freaking out and lashing out. That is a perfectly fine scene. But the fact that it ends with him punching Ed O'Neill and him ending up with his ass in the air, and then right after that ends with him looking at a nudie card, you're like, okay, well, what emotion do you want me to end that scene with? Because I'm not ending it on a drama. This really is a drama that does have some comedic elements that I feel had too many added. But beyond that, I mean, just from a story-wise structural perspective with an arc, which, I'm the nerd, Jeff, that really likes that kind of stuff. I thought it played together really well.
I love this movie. I don't actually make any qualms about how much I love how this movie is put together. And my problems with it are not the worst. Like they're not big, aggressive things. And from a reality standpoint, not a film standpoint, it makes even more sense. I think the actors are great. I think they made Ethan Embry's character a little too unlikable in such that when something bad happens to him, you don't actually feel bad about it.
I would agree with that.
Where it's like he calls his father and that happens. You're like, yeah, good. Fuck you, kid. Instead of being like, oh, this must really suck for him. Like Dutch has more empathy for this kid than the viewer does during this. I understand why it bombed. And I do think a lot of the answer of that is, who is this for? Like, I genuinely think that's the reason. Like, Doyle's not a young enough or likable enough character for people to want to see it. And Ed O'Neill wasn't necessarily the star that he would eventually become. He was a TV guy. And, TV, it used to be TV, you dip your toes into movies, and it did not go well.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing is, I think he gives a fantastic dramatic performance.
They all do. Like, Ethan Embry does a great job playing a little prick. He does a very good job. He's an incredibly talented actor. Look at all the different characters he's played in the biggest things he's done. You're like, Dutch, he plays like a monster. He plays like a full-on stoner in Empire Records. And he plays like sort of the lovelorn, smart loser in Can't Hardly Wait. Like, he does all three of those things, which are drastically different characters, very, very well.
And one, I've got to buy that he at least got his foot in the door thanks to John Hughes. I was kind of shocked. He shows up in National Lampoon's Vegas Vacation, but that
right.
was not, John Hughes was not associated with
that.
No,
it wasn't. Yeah, that's the first, and that was the first non-National Lampoon's Vacation.
Really?
It wasn't National Lampoon's Vegas Vacation. It was just Vegas Vacation.
But it just it's what very much Never Say Never Again, where it's like same character,
yes.
Same actor, but not.
Which, by the way, while that was going on, while the Ethan Embry stuff, because that was happening on Thanksgiving, it was like Thanksgiving Eve. I was watching Vegas Vacation, starring Ethan Embry in Vegas, while all of this stuff was going on that we talked about with the payoff in there. I'm not even kidding.
Did you win a car? Did you win a, you put one in, you got a key, you put another one, you got a key. They're all your cars.
Yeah, no, but that's a real thing that happened. I'm not even kidding. Like, I can send you the photo I took. I took several photos of, so if you look at your Instagram messages, I just sent one to you. I did take a photo of that, and I was going to tweet it, but it seemed too thirsty to be like, Ethan Embry followed me while I'm on a vacation in Vegas, and I'm watching Ethan Embry in Vegas Vacation. Like, I legitimately took that photo.
I'll give it to you, where I wouldn't be too downtrodden on like sharing that story, but you're sharing it in the right venue. Like, give it a little time to breathe, share it on the Dutch podcast.
It's weird because I really do like Ethan Embry's work, and Roger Ebert did not. like Roger Ebert didn't like, I think, any movie he was in. I really do.
I'll link at some place the Roger Ebert review.
It's pretty mean-spirited and misses kind of the crux of the film, which is like learning how to pick yourself up and move forward. Like, Roger just complains a lot about how you have the money, use it to get out, which is such a detached it's sort of like Roger is putting himself in the place of Doyle. You have this money and you're not using it to fix all your problems, when the entire point of like Ed O'Neill's character, Dutch's pathos, is money is not always going to be there to save you. Sometimes you have to tough it out.
Yes, I texted you about that after reading Roger Ebert's review. I was like, I'm sorry, like, I am okay with film criticism. Obviously, we're doing it right here. I will get angry at film criticism when I'm like, that was in the movie. I'm
Yeah,
like,
you
you were
missed the
allowed
point.
to complain. And then I'm even fine too when if I miss the point and someone's like, oh yeah, that was there, that this and this happened. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't see it. But it is not okay when you're just like, when you miss straight text is when I start like rolling my eyes. a
Yeah,
little.
it's like you missed the entire point, if that's the case. Yeah, like that to me, like Roger Ebert doesn't always land. He was really weird in the 90s. He got just super into special effects. Like he loved movies that just had good special effects at that point in time. But there was a lot of the stuff like he was a little bit up his own ass about. And this is, I think, one of them where he's so up his own ass about it that he missed the entire point, which I guess is also a failure of the movie if you're not relaying that information well enough. But that specific argument is not a failure of the movie.
No. And then what I would also say is it was also weird. Instead of being like, holy cow, John Hughes does it again. He's like, John Hughes is doing another movie. I'm like, dude, what? You cannot hold that against a.
Yeah.
I'm just impressed. Like the fact that John Hughes was able to do Curly Sue, Dutch, Home Alone 2 in like less than a year span of releasing is wild.
Did he do that when Jurassic Park and Schindler's List came out in the same year?
I think he did. He was like the Flight of the Dinosaurs. We've already seen it, Spielberg. You're like, what movie were you watching? Which is probably how Ebert read it.
Yeah. I mean, the reviews for Dutch aren't good. Even in retrospect, people give it, pretty low ratings. I think IMDb has it like as like a 4 or something. Like it's not well received particularly, but to me, I love it. Love it.
You mentioned this about some other comedies, I think, right? It's like if you go in expecting one thing and you don't get what you're expecting, sometimes the response to that is worse than actually taking a step back and being like, oh, what was I examining this way? And that's the problem is like, this is definitely pitched as like a slapstick road trip silly movie. And you're not expecting like a drama character introspection about a wounded kid and, a working class guy who's trying to, heal a family. Like, that's a drama cell. So I definitely hear that. So, Jeff, and the last thing I was going to sell, Jeff, is we get to dip our toes in the multiverse. So that's how this came about. So here's what I'm doing. I always get way into the weeds about the construction of Nerd seasons. So we just wrapped season 5 of Nerd, which was childhood neglect. And for that, we had Searching for Bobby Fischer, Adventures in Babysitting, Home Alone 2. We just did Dutch. And because of Jeff, Christmas time, Jeff, we are going to be doing Iron Man 3. And so what I'm going to say, Jeff, is we have a multiverse here where pivoting around Home Alone 2, we now have holiday movies. So we're going to have this is a sideways season 5. We could have gone with childhood neglect out from Home Alone 2, or we can go for holiday movies out from Home Alone 2, which is what we are doing.
So I'm very excited about doing that. Like Iron Man 3, I think is a very underrated Marvel film. I'm looking forward to doing that episode. And you can look, you can listen.
Look and listen. All right, Jeff. Anything else you wanted up on Dutch? I mean,
a couple of things. For one, John Candy was originally going to be Dutch.
That would have been a much different movie.
Yeah, it
much different movie.
It absolutely would have
worked. I think that's like when you found out. I think Billy Crystal wanted to do like My Giant, and he wanted to do it with Andre the Giant, and I forget the guy. They got like a really tall guy that was like lanky,
I think, or something.
Yeah, and I think that movie actually would have played with Andre the Giant. So I love Ed O'Neill. I can't feel bad where I'm like, man, Ed O'Neill, you shouldn't have been in this, but he's been in 2 of the biggest sitcoms of all time, long running ones, Married with Children and now Modern Family. I think this would have played with John Candy, actually.
Ed O'Neill and Ethan Embry did have a reunion project in, I believe it was the early 2000s. They played detectives on Dragnet, the television reboot, which I thought was really, really kind of cool here. There were a lot of people that were considered for the role, even though it went to Ed. It is what it is.
It is a good movie. I
like it. I like this movie a lot. And of course, Peter Feynman, the director, you know what his biggest movie was, right?
What do we got?
Crocodile Dundee.
Oh, well, there you go. Australia. Yeah, there you go. Australian. I got to ask this though, Jeff. The planes, trains, and automobile feud, is that just I mean, that seems like that qualifies as a Thanksgiving movie. And in his review, Ebert is like, as opposed to the lovely planes, trains, and automobile, which is another.
Yeah, but they were up Steve Martin's ass the whole time. Like, Steve Martin couldn't do wrong in Siskel and Ebert's eyes.
And planes, trains, and automobile it's a rough one where I don't really know if Steve Martin's character grows enough through it, because at the end he does invite him home, but he seems like just a jerk the entire.
Steve Martin is the
problem
jerk. Yeah.
we have a problem with Dutch. Yeah, that's good. We have a problem with Doyle in Dutch, as you're saying, in that he turns a little too late in the third act. We probably would have done 2 scenes earlier, right?
Yeah, he's too insufferable. There's no softening moments there.
And I would argue Steve Martin is the same, and he's only saved by, if you haven't seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, there's a Shyamalan twist at the end. And I think that is like the trick that is used. Because I think that movie, Steve Martin is really unlikable the whole movie. John Candy is really annoying the whole movie. The end of the movie, they kind of both get saved by this reveal. It is not that is a movie I've probably seen 90 to 95% of on basic cable, but have never had the drive to watch the entire movie. I do think, Jeff, it still qualifies as a Thanksgiving movie, but I'm okay if you're just like, skip it for Thanksgiving, just watch Dutch.
I love Dutch. I do love it. I do love it. Granted, we just did tell you everything that happens. Let's hope you watch Dutch before this happens. It's kind of funny that, like, part of the comedy is Dutch getting his ass kicked, because at no point in time would a 12-year-old be able to inflict any damage. But hey, look at that. You know, Home Alone would have killed everyone. So we pull ourselves away from it a little bit in that regard. I really enjoy this movie. I think I understand why some people didn't, but I love it. I genuinely love it. This is my sort of mom's meatloaf, where it tastes great to me. I grew up on it. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I loved Ed O'Neill at the time. I didn't realize Ethan Embry was the kid from Dutch until like many, many years later, like in the 2000s.
Wow.
Did it occur to me that I figured that out, because it's so.
You're losing some nerd points there, Jeff.
Well, he looks so different as Doyle than he does as Mark in Empire Records. Like, you would never compare those two together, or as Preston and Can't Hardly Wait.
I'll give you that. This is an interesting take I will give you that I got to experience this with. If you go into Dutch as a film snob, I think you and I both have the ability to enjoy films, like just sit down. I think you and I have both said we liked the Book of Boba Fett. And I liked it because I'm just like, I don't need Dutch. I'm just like, it's on in the background.
I don't think I ever went on record saying I liked the Book of Boba Fett.
I think you said it was okay or is all right.
Fine. It's not good.
Not great. Yeah, it's fine, but you can it's like a baseball game. Just put it on.
The space Vespas were a bit much. That might have been a conversation you had with somebody else. But if somebody remembers me saying that, please, in the comments, bring it up. Like, mention it, because I must have been feeling real good.
I'm going to have to see what you were saying about Book of Boba Fett when you broke those cards, because I thought you said the series was all right. So anyway, but maybe I'm like taking Jeff's all right isn't like.
I'm not going to talk shit on the thing I'm opening cards for either.
Oh no, you're breaking reality for me, Jeff. But anyway,
no, but I was like, it's fine. I probably wasn't going to say, oh, this was the best show, because it was not. But
yeah, I dug Book of Boba Fett. I'm not going to say it's great, but I also didn't go in with a critical eye. I just put it on.
Yeah,
kind of watched it. Had no reason to watch it again. Moved on with my life. Dutch is a movie where if you go in with a critical eye and you're asking questions like an AP English senior in every scene, it's a lot more enjoyable.
And you in AP English? I couldn't tell. You didn't bring it up in this episode.
I said AP English, thought it was actually IB English, Jeff, but that felt just too much. And all these years later, Jeff, I still don't know how to spell baccalaureate, but so the B in IB.
Baccalaureate.
It's International Baccalaureate Program. But I don't know how to spell it. Anyway, is what it is. But I was in that, Jeff. So there you go.
You don't have to tell me what the baccalaureate was. All right.
I don't.
No.
But what if you don't know? Oh yeah, is it French? I didn't.
Baccalaureate. Yeah, it is French. That is it's famously French.
So what does it mean?
It is the baccalaureate is the French, like the test that they would take. It's like the big college system and program that they would push people through. It's a sign of high intelligence
and whatever. Yeah. As I'm going to say, I don't know what it's worth, Jeff. Over 20 years after the fact, I'm like, oh, that's what that word means. I still don't know how to spell it. I'll learn at some point. Or that you said you didn't know that Ethan Embry was in Dutch until the 2000s. Which is worse? Who is to say?
I am. Whatever I do is worse.
So, okay. So that says your opinion of the International Baccalaureate program, which I'm butchering the pronunciation of too, apparently. All right, Jeff. I think we've definitely hit the end there if that's what we're discussing.
Yeah.
I really had a lot of fun. Thanks for letting me watch this. You suggest good stuff to me. Next time I suggest something, I know it's going to be bad, but good news, that's going to be a little ways out.
Whatever you want. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're like, we should talk about this, I'm like, look, man, it's on you. You absolutely can do that. But I'm very excited to do Iron Man 3. I'm very interested to that, especially because this is a movie that came out in the internet age. So reaction can go beyond just Roger Ebert didn't like it. Like, there's so much more to it, especially because it was the first movie that came after Avengers, right?
Is that right? Because yeah, he's like,
because it's all about
the
the after effects of the Avengers. Yeah.
And I still haven't seen it, but I did know that part. I've seen enough. So this is interesting to me. You've suggested 2 movies I haven't seen yet. For whatever reason, I don't know why. I've seen a lot of the Marvel movies. I've seen a lot of the Marvel shows. That one just missed me. I actually really dug Loki, and it is probably no worse thing than I really dug Loki. And at the end of Loki, I'm like, do I need to watch Quantum Mania or whatever it was called? And I'm like, I'm probably good.
You did fine not watching that.
Loki was really good. I really dug Loki season 1 and season 2. But yeah, the sad part is that gave me no desire to watch any of the movies around Kang. So is what it is.
It's all good. But yeah, so how are they going to access Iron Man 3, Dre?
Well, I don't know. Should I do the plug or should you do the plug?
So if you want to listen to that episode, which you do, head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May. You get not only access to that exclusive, but other exclusives like Ugh Fine with Kim Crawl, as well as early access to this show, as well as, of course, a 1 week early uncensored episode with bonus content of Jeff Has Cool Friends. You know, and by say I mean every episode is early uncensored with bonus content. You can also sign up for different tiers, one of which being this specific tier where you can record a podcast with me. I will be your co-host. You can also get stuff in the mail. You can be a producer of Jeff Has Cool Friends. You can get, any of the cards or anything that I open on I Must Break You. I have lots of really great stuff. I've also got a show with Tom Ryman of Tom and Jeff Watch Batman fame called Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, available on the Gamefully Unemployed Patreon, as well as all the great stuff I do with Adam Todd Brown on the You Don't Even Like This network, or You Don't Even Like Podcasts network. I also do a live show at Blast from the Past at Mint on Card in Burbank, California on Magnolia. It is the second Friday of every month. So when this goes up, our 8th anniversary show is going to be happening in January. You can follow me at social media at Hey There Jeffro, as well as my YouTube is also at Hey There Jeffro. So go to that.
You did briefly mention it, but Jeff has a show called I Must Break You on his YouTube, where every Wednesday at 2 p.m. he breaks packs of cards. And as he already mentioned, if you're at the right tier, you can get some of those cards. It is one of the most enjoyable things. I'm trying to bust in supplemental content that we will see might happen in the next year, Jeff. You can find me most places as Nerd Numbers, Twitter, Blue Sky to a degree, I suppose, chess.com if you want to play chess against me. I also do the Box Score Geek show with Brian Foster, former guest of Nerd, Brian Foster, Magic aficionado. That goes about every other week. It varies based on time and availability. And if you are a basketball stats nerd, BoxScoreGeeks.com has advanced stats that tell you why people like Allen Iverson are overrated. I update that every couple of days. I try and do daily. Doesn't happen.
Pardon the pun. Big crossover with this one right here.
That beautifully done. I'm a big Allen Iverson fan. He just didn't win basketball games. That's all I'll say. All right.
If you're only listening to this for free and you're not going to go over to the Patreon, have a happy holiday. We will see you next time. And if you're listening to this, make sure you check out Jeff Has Cool Friends as well, because it's a really good show. We'll have to get Ethan Embry on the show at some point in time.
If you get Ethan Embry, I'm going to flip. I really hope that can happen. So,
all right, man. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you all for listening. Dre, say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Nerd. If you want to help keep the podcast growing, it's definitely worth your while to head over to patreon.com/Jeff May. And also you'll get bonuses and early access to cool stuff. Cool stuff like videos of Jeff showing off awesome collectibles and doing pack-breaking videos. It'd be worth your while to check out Jeff May's YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@HeyThereJeffro. That's spelled JEFFRO. And shocker, that is also his Twitter and Instagram account as well. So follow Jeff everywhere. You can find me most places on the internet as @NerdNumbers. Also, shout out to Chris Haugen for the outro theme of Pure Magic. Thanks so much, and we'll be back with another nerdy subject soon.